episode of On the Bridge, I'm chatting with Munro from Divergent Yachting, who's also the project manager and owner's rep for sailing Yacht Black Pearl. Hi Derek, thank you for joining me. I'm excited to have this conversation. I am excited to learn more about Black Pearl because she's so famous, but there's so much to talk about. So let's start at the beginning. What was the initial vision or brief for Black Pearl, and how did you get involved in the project initially?
So initially with Black Pearl, I wasn't working as Divergent Yachting. I was subcontracting to SE Marine as yacht consultancy, which is the company that I'd been building boats with since 2004.
Right.
And so I had been working with SE Marine, overseeing the construction and final stages of Excellence 5 at Aberking and Rasmussen when they signed the contract with Oceanco for Black Pearl.
Okay.
And because I was the only one in the company, I think, that had been sailing, because my past as a captain was mainly sailing boats,
Yeah.
they asked if I would come in and step in and help with the Black Pearl project. So I drove down from Aberking. Initially, every couple of weeks, I'd drive down for 2 or 3 days to the shipyard and go through drawings and stuff. The boat started as a 95-metre project with a white hull, satellite domes on the superstructure, and obviously the dyno rigs were white as well. That was when the contract was signed. And then obviously, as everyone can see, things progressed, and she's now 105 metres, and all the satellite domes are somewhere else, and things have changed a little bit. So
when you first got the sort of call about going to join the project, and you were told probably some quite brief details about her, what did you think?
Firstly, I was excited to finally be building a sailboat, because at that stage, I'd built 12 motorboats. I'd been involved in the build of 12 motorboats. Right. So I was really keen to get involved in a sailboat. And then seeing the project, obviously, on paper was kind of exciting. And then meeting the client for the first time and listening to him, and then chatting over the following months as we developed and learnt more about what his vision was. Yeah, then the excitement kind of built. But it was one of those projects that you couldn't talk about. So it was very much NDA'd, anyone who came in. My wife and kids had no idea what I was building until it came out of the shed 4.5 years later.
Wow.
So yeah, we kept everything very quiet, and it was exciting because we were doing new stuff. It was nice. It was like any job when you do something new, you do lots of research, and the client had me flying places and looking into things, and we discussed until 2 or 3 in the morning all sorts of different ideas that he had. He was very much into the project.
Okay, so she's famous for many reasons, one being some of the unique and innovative systems. Can you tell me, from your perspective as the build manager, what makes her special and why the owner and build team wanted to use the features in the build?
Yeah, I think the most obvious thing to start with is the dyno rigs. And we know that Maltese Falcon is a dyno rig. She was the first one, and without...
Can you explain what a dyno rig is?
Okay, so the dyno rig is the mast and the yard system, the sail system on this boat. And it's the same as Maltese Falcon.
Yeah.
Maltese Falcon, their systems run on hydraulics.
Okay.
And obviously they were 10, 12 years older than we were.
Yeah.
So we changed all of the power systems to electrical. And we also sped up the rotations. We pretty much doubled the speed of the rotation compared to Maltese Falcon.
Right.
And the purpose of that was so that we could tack and sail more efficiently. So that was the first part. And then we looked at putting solar on the sails. The client spent a lot of money with a research institute, how we could bond the solar onto the Dacron, and how we could protect it, and then how we could connect the cables when the sails came in and out, and how efficient it might be, which is why, although we haven't put solar on the sails, we do have every single yard is wired ready to take solar in preparation for it to happen. And the reason we didn't put solar on the sails was because the two of us disagreed on the benefits of solar. And the reason we disagreed was when we did our sea trials for the regeneration, we had calculated that we might get X as an input to the boat from the regeneration power. But in actual fact, we got Z, which was 4 times greater than what we initially thought.
Okay.
So when we're sailing, the regeneration is incredibly efficient and effective, which means that when I'm sailing, if I've got my sails out, obviously, because I'm sailing, why do I need more power from the sails when I'm getting more than I need from the shaft? So my discussion with him right up into the last week actually was that we should put solar on the front of the yards.
Right.
And actually he finally agreed to do it, and I was in the process of putting together the purchase order when he passed away. So unfortunately it hasn't happened yet, but maybe it'll happen in the future.
But how amazing though that it already performed better than anyone had estimated.
Oh yeah, we were, it was a great moment. Obviously you go down there and you're sailing along, no generators running, boat is fully operational, laundry, galley and everything, dead silent, and all you can hear is the shaft turning.
Yeah, that's
and so
amazing.
The rest of the boat is quiet, and you've got this power coming in, and it's like, oh, what's going on? This is, compared to another 100-meter motorboat, they can't do that. It's pretty cool. It's a cool system, and I think that's possibly one of the reasons that, and a few other bits and pieces, are our engineering team on Black Pearl has changed very, very little since we delivered. Whereas the other teams, the deck team and the interior team have changed, but the engineering team, the guys are really keen and enthusiastic about all the things the boat can do.
Yeah, and specialists, I guess, now that they've been through the build and now the boat's operational and going through all these systems and doing all this testing and researching, you've got to really have your heart in it.
Yeah, and they're doing that all the time. We think that we've finished the boat, but actually there are tweaks we can still do, and the engineers have come, oh, why don't we try this? And what do we do in that? And so we're at a stage now where we need to change the batteries on Black Pearl. They've been in there, so they're now 8 years old, and they've been used. And so we're looking at new battery systems for the boat, and we've done a lot of research. And this is interesting, in as much as I think we've found a new battery system that is not lithium ion. It's called a supercapacitor graphene battery, and it is non-flammable, non-combustible, there's no fumes, and everything, which means from a shipbuilding perspective, for anyone building a new boat, they won't have to put in all the extraction and the firefighting and the A boundaries and everything that we had to put in on Black Pearl and that all the other boats are putting in at the moment. And so it'll save the shipyard a load of money. The batteries last 40 years. They can recharge 4 times a day. From 0 to 100%, which means that in actual fact you can run your generators for a lot less, because I can charge a megawatt in 35 minutes. So if I can do that, I could potentially run our generators for 4 hours and the rest of the day is 0, right? But it also means that I could potentially do regeneration for 4 hours instead of having to do regeneration for 10 hours, and I would have my batteries topped up. And
also
silent
so
ship.
much safer.
Oh,
you think the safety and the lower insurance because of not carrying.
Well, and more importantly, because of the way our industry is at the moment, when you finish with them in 40 years, you send them back to the manufacturer and he changes out a few parts and you reuse them. You don't dump the lithium back into the ground and wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
So, that's something we are looking at. We hope to have those changed out in the next year. So just finalising some pricing at the moment. Actually, we're waiting for the...
And price-wise, are they a lot more than...
Well, surprisingly, no. The supplier's done some calculations for us, and it looks like over the lifetime of the battery, it works out at something like 0.03 cents per kilowatt created or used.
Wow.
Whereas with the lithium-ion battery, it's 0.16, so 16 cents. So price-wise, it's, over the lifetime, it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And then you've also got to look at, like we said, about the cost of all the extra bits of equipment in the boat
and the build
and the structure, because although it's cheaper for the shipyard, that means it's cheaper for the buyer, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to pay for all that in his build. So the savings overall probably mean they're very similar in price.
And a bit of a game changer for all the other reasons as well.
Yeah, hopefully. I think it'd be good for the industry.
Yeah.
It'd be really good for the industry.
Well, that leads me on to my next question. Sustainability is a hot topic right now, as we know. Every forum, conference, everything that's going on sort of stems around that. Can you explain what makes Black Pearl one of the most talked about yachts in sustainability right now? And what challenges did you face during the build due to some of the tech systems that she has?
Obviously, the regeneration and the reduced fuel use is a big part of that. And a lot of things we did were our technical water is all treated and used to wash the decks down. Our heat recovery system is used to heat up the hot water systems on board the boat and the jacuzzi and the pool. When we built Black Pearl, we doubled all the insulation. We asked the shipyard to double up on all the insulation so that we could reduce our reliance on the HVAC systems. Okay. And so we wouldn't have to be forcing as much cold air in, which means a reduction on generator use, which is a further reduction on fossil fuel use. Obviously the crew, because of the boat, the crew are very much into sustainability. We don't have any plastic water bottles on board, and the washing up liquids they use are all bio, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, on the whole, and also for Oceanco, we were probably the first boat that double glazed all the side windows. Right. Once again, that's all to do with the HVAC and the heat load. So we did a lot of research into different parts of the vessel to try and improve it as much as possible, including the glass, the layers you get on the glass, and what films you put on to reduce UV and IR and everything into the boat.
So actually, sustainability and environmental issues were really at the heart of the whole build, and I expect probably the culture of the crew on the boat also, but from the very start. Very much.
And the client was, he led that, and he would come on board the boat and he would talk to the crew. And during sea trial, actually when he came on board, every now and then he'd come and just sit in the crew mess and have lunch with the crew and have a chat. And, they took on his vision very, personally. And very enthusiastically. And I think that was really important. He was just a really nice guy to get on with and very smart. He was an engineer. He had, I think it was 12 patents for different products that he'd created at certain stages of his life. So we got to the point where whenever we had meetings, we actually removed the notepads and the pencils from the room, because every little thing that he looked at, he would change. So a fender hook, for example. We were ordering fender hooks and we explained to him what the fender hooks were, and he looked at the fender hooks and he was like, oh no, we can change the design. So our ordering of fender hooks was delayed by about 3 months just because he wanted to redesign them all. In the end, we went for normal fender hooks, but it was just his thing.
That's just how his mind worked, that the devil's in the detail.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I guess if you have that engineering mind, building a boat like Black Pearl must have been like a kid's playground of being able to let all your enthusiasm and knowledge really go wild. But it's so nice that then the crew and Oceanco and everyone, came together to try and really create his vision. And also, I guess you have to channel the enthusiasm slightly, because there are certain things that maybe he would conjure up that couldn't be possible. But ultimately, every part of that build was really curated and thought about.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there was one point early on in the project where he asked the designers, I'd like to have this design. And the designer said to him, well, that's not possible. And he was like, no, I'd really like to do this. And the designer said, no, that's not possible on a yacht. And he just looked at them and said, it's only not possible if you don't have the money. Please make it possible.
Yeah.
So, that was his kind of mindset.
It's like an experiment in a way, though. Yeah. That, I mean, obviously you have to have the budget, which he did, but that he wanted to use that budget to really create something that pushed his boundaries and also pushed the boundaries of what was out there at the time, because obviously Maltese Vulcan was the only other comparison really that had been built that had even a slight hint of the same technology.
Yeah, totally. And we were very lucky with Oceanco. And it was obviously, like any build, there were some ups and downs and periods of disagreement, but the shipyard were incredibly flexible and understanding to what he wanted, and they also understood him. They took the time to understand what his and the way he thought and his process and everything. The boat was very late in delivery, and in a normal shipyard, because of build slots, you wouldn't be able to do that. But fortunately, Oceanco had other slots where they could put boats, and like I said, they were very, very good with the way they dealt with Oleg, and it worked both ways. because there were issues on both sides. So
There always is,
you know,
isn't there?
yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, now we have a really good relationship with the shipyard, and they have an amazing product. They created a product that at the moment I don't think is, you know, met by anyone else, just because of how she's so different.
Yeah. Well, they've built something that is industry changing and something to be extremely proud of, with someone with a good budget pushing them to create that. They can only create what the owner wants to create, really, can't they? And is willing to pay for. So how amazing for them to have that opportunity to be chosen to be the shipyard that he went to with his budget and his vision.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that leads me on to my next question. In your opinion, are the systems and tech that have been used on Black Pearl scalable in the build of future super yachts? And how do you see her build influencing the next generation of both motor yachts and sailing yachts?
So unfortunately, we were told to keep everything quiet for a long time.
Sure.
You know, which was a pity. We couldn't share everything and as openly as we would have wanted to. But having said that, the most noticeable one, I guess, is Project Zero that Vrypack and Dijkstra are involved in at the moment.
Yeah.
Everything they're doing, we've done. But they're obviously doing it better than we had because they're a lot younger than we are.
Yeah.
But that kind of project is what should be leading the industry, especially in the sailboat industry.
Sure.
And Project Zero has no fossil fuel engines on board. We do, because we're much earlier in the stage, and I don't think on our vessel we could have run without them as a backup anyway.
Is it 8 years since the start of the project, or 8 years?
For Black Pearl?
Yeah.
I know, we started in 2012. It's
Okay,
13 years I've been involved with Black Pearl.
So that's interesting that in that time, that the only project that's similar is Project Zero.
Yeah, although having said that, there are obviously lots of other boats using tech that we introduced to the industry.
Yeah.
I like regeneration.
Right, okay.
Right, and battery storage. I mean, I think Swan and Southern Winds and Baltic and, you know, anything out of Vitters, any sailing boat now pretty much has regeneration in one way or another, and a battery storage system to run, and is trying to go as little fossil fuel reliance as possible. So I think from that side it made a really, really big difference, and it's a shame he didn't see that.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's obviously a positive. Battery storage, as far as I'm aware, we were the first to have as big a battery storage. Ethereal was probably one of the first ones, but that was, you know, decades ago.
Yeah.
And it's changed a bit since then. But the Lloyd's hazard study that we did for Black Pearl and the integration of lithium-ion batteries into Black Pearl, that was a 7-month project all on its own, which is obviously one of the reasons the boat was a bit later. But you know, for everyone to understand the dangers and what safety requirements were needed for lithium-ion, I mean, believe the Lloyd's requirements were based around what we did on Black Pearl, and they're still being used now. So a lot of stuff has filtered into the industry in one way or another.
Which is great.
Which is really, really good. And there's a lot of people who are doing technical water treatment. There's, you know, HVAC is improving and everything else. So,
I think actually sort of produced lots of mini projects, in the sense that the research that you were doing for all these different products and technologies that you were looking at actually have been their own projects, in the sense that you've gone off for 7 months, researched this particular battery or regeneration system that then has come back to the boat. So whilst the boat is actually being built, and that's one project, there's 7 different projects going on of all the other technologies that you wanted to put on the boat that maybe weren't used before.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially solar. I mean, you know, the solar research we did was amazing. There's solar that's still way better than what we looked at, and way better than the system that Zero are looking at the moment, that you could put on a boat, but it's a cost factor.
Yeah.
You know, there are solar panels out there that return 45, 46%, whereas most of the ones we use and we're aware of in silicone are 27 to 28%. Now, they were 21 when we started research, but they're improving the 27, 28% return now. But there are cells out there, if you want to spend the money, that will do 46%.
Yeah.
And we spent months looking at that, you know, flying from this place to that place and researching and trying, and little test panels and everything. Unfortunately, the gallium arsenide cells that give you the best return they'll flex a little bit. But when they handed me the first one and said it's flexible, I just took it a little bit too far. So
not flexible enough.
So a 2,500 little cell was, that didn't work very well.
They're like, leave now.
Yeah.
Leave now
Don't
before you
touch
break
anymore.
anything else.
Don't touch anymore.
Oh.
But
Sadly, the owner passed away before the boat was completely finished.
Mm-hmm.
But can you tell me a bit more about his involvement during the design and build process? I know we've talked a little bit about it. Obviously, he had a clear vision, but were there any personal must-haves that he really wanted to shape the final outcome of the boat?
I mean, obviously all the technical stuff
Yes.
was a must-have. The interior design was something he was very heavily involved with, and poor Valentina Zania from Nuvolari at the time spent a lot of hours with him going over design and tweaking, to the extent that when we finished the interior of the main saloon, and we have a 2.8 meter head height in the main saloon, he used to come to the boat and there was no furniture inside it, and he would stand there for literally months. Every time he came to the boat, he'd stand on the starboard aft doorway and look and just stare at the ceiling. And at the end he was like, no, the ceiling, we need to move that section around all the domes, has to be moved up 2 millimeters. I'm not happy with it.
2 millimeters.
So had he not passed away, we would probably still be moving the ceiling 2 millimeters.
Yeah.
But he was involved in every detail. I remember walking out one morning, that's probably not really a story, but that should go public, but I came out of my cabin, and I was fortunate enough to have a cabin on the boat when he was on board, one of the guest cabins, and I was walking down the guest passageway, and he was lying on the floor. This was 6:30 in the morning, and he's lying on the floor in his underwear looking at this little section at the bottom of the floor. There was a gap where the lights were going to run, and he wasn't happy with the gap. So he asked me to lie on the floor with him and check this out. And all I could think of, and all I could think was, I hope the crew don't come up to do any cleaning.
You weren't in your
and
underwear
service.
as well,
I wasn't in my
either.
underwear, no. I was in crew, but I still thought, this is really a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm going to sit here and we're going to look and check this piece of wood and see if we can move it 3 millimeters to just get things.
And was he right?
He was, most of the time he was right. Yeah, he was. His eye for detail was incredible.
Yeah.
Now, all the little gold asparaguses around the boat he designed, chose the height. The most distinct mark on the bow of the boat, the stainless steel, the bits, we have stainless strips like this, that took 3 months for him to get the right dimensions. And that bow, the design of the bow, he designed that. The original bow shape on the spec was full-on like Motor Yacht A.
Right.
And then it changed, and we had this little bit at the bottom and an angle like this. And then he spent, I think it was probably 6 hours in an office with putty until he got the right angle that he wanted. And then he went away and thought about that, and he changed that again. I mean, all of that was detail that he wanted to have just right.
Sure. So he was an engineer, but also he was creative, if he had a passion for the interiors as well.
Yeah, very much so. And he was actually a really good artist. He was really good at drawing out his ideas. It was good to work with.
Yeah.
There were long days though. He never slept. And I'd have to get up and do an inspection or something on board at 7, and we'd still be working at 3. And I can remember 2 times having to say, "Look, I've got to go to bed. You can play.
Yeah.
I'm going to bed because I've got to get up."
So
But
obviously for him it was a passion project. He really
without a
put his
doubt.
heart and soul into it too.
Yeah, and he was fun. You ask any crew member who was involved with him, we laughed a lot about stuff. There was always a joke somewhere. That, amongst all the detail and the seriousness, there was always a bit of banter and a good laugh. So, yeah.
That's lovely. How did you balance the line between his expectations, managing a pretty impressive budget, meeting build deadlines with the yard designers, and when you look back, is there something you learned particularly from this project?
Well, obviously we were late, so we didn't really meet the deadlines as as we should have.
But you, as a build manager, you are sort of the glue that holds all the different people together, including the owner. And so interesting listening to him as a person, because I find that fascinating, the psychology of how his mind worked. But actually, when you've got a team of designers and engineers, and you are the person who has to sort of be the mediator between his vision, his creativity, and his obsessive, detail-driven mind, but also people who are trying to get that boat built and out. And you're the one who sort of has to, plus manage the money, which is a huge responsibility.
Yeah, you have a lot of spreadsheets, and you spend a lot of time communicating.
Yeah.
And it's about the communication, and you're educating not only the client, because he's educating you in some way, but you're also educating him about what can and can't be done.
Yeah.
But then you also have to educate the shipyard about, you signed a deal with this particular individual, and this is his vision. And if you didn't understand that at the beginning, then really you should have done some research, or someone told you something incorrectly. And like I said, we were lucky with Oceanco. They were very, very tolerant, very good. And there's no doubt that we had moments where we didn't really like each other.
Yeah.
But, you get over that and you get on with it and you crack on. And because the ultimate goal is to give the client a product that he's incredibly happy with, and it's probably better than what he envisaged.
Yeah.
And it's a reflection on the shipyard. As Oceanco now, they still use Black Pearl for a lot of their promotion stuff because they did a great job.
Yeah.
I'm
sure.
It just took a little longer than we expected. But there is, when you're running a project like that, and I ran that project for 4 years pretty much by myself, which was really hard work and took a lot out on the family and stuff, because it was a 7-day-a-week job.
Especially if you can't talk to your family about it.
Yeah.
Most people, when they've had a stressful day at the office, go home and they sort of debrief and have a rant, and then they feel much better. But if you're going home and you're not able to discuss perhaps the details of why you're feeling so under pressure, that must have been extremely hard.
Yeah, well, I lost my hair over it.
I think you've told me that excuse over a few things.
But yeah, I mean, it was kind of tough, but it changed in 2016, and I think it changed for the better, certainly for me and for the project, and we got more people involved, which was really good. But it was all about going back to how do you manage the project. It's really about keeping on top of the spreadsheets and keeping on top of the emails and the communication, and that's what was when I was doing 7 days a week and running it by myself, that's what was taking my time. I'd come home in the weekends and be sitting at a laptop by 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And working when the kids and everyone got up, and then stop, and then when they were doing something else, you'd be back on your laptop.
Yeah.
But I'd never do that again. I'd definitely make sure my contract if I was subcontracting to another person like I was at that particular point, I'd make sure my contract was far clearer. And a little bit of that was my fault. Because I believe that I wanted to make sure the client was getting what he wanted, and he'd never had a boat before.
Right.
So our technical contract with him was to do the technical side of it and a few bits, and then Oleg came up to me and said, "Well, hey, I need to buy a tender. What do I do? Where do I get tenders? What's going on?" Yeah. So then I got involved in the whole tender package. Oh, and we need to do this, and the people who were supposed to be doing that. Were the brokerage side, and so I'm not going to name their names so everyone can figure it out, but they weren't doing it.
Right.
So I ended up doing it. And the same with the security package. I was told at the beginning he didn't want any security.
Of course.
And then he turned around when we were going through the package at one point, it was 2013. He said, what security have I got? And I told him, you got a couple of CCTV cameras here and you got one in the engine room. And he just went ballistic. He was really angry. He was not happy at all. His daughter, they'd tried to kidnap his daughter previously, and so now we have an incredible security system. But that was just poor communication, and me doing things that I was not contracted to
beyond,
do. So I ended up being involved in all the owner supply stuff, and I ended up doing a lot of stuff that was not in the original brief. But I wanted the client to come out of the project being pretty happy with what he had, you know, and so I'm pretty, it's worked. I lost my hair, but it worked.
Oh God, it more than worked. I mean, it's a project that will go down in history, and you did deliver something that the owner, I'm sure, would have been, well, before he passed away, he was very happy with. Sadly, he didn't get to see it completed, but from what you've explained with his vision, I mean, you more than delivered, and you obviously had a sense of responsibility to him as a person, that you cared for him, got on well with him, that you didn't want to see him sort of, you know, floundering, getting ripped off or anything, trying to find other things. But that's quite a responsibility. So
well, he was a good guy, and he was, like I said, the crew, everyone liked him, and he would vanish from meetings at the shipyard, and we'd think he's gone to the toilet or whatever, and then next thing you'd go out half an hour later, 40 minutes later, and he'd be in a bilge with a welder or someone just having a chat, and you know, and he was so into the project. And when, you know, at the end of every project, you get in t-shirts or jackets for the people who've been involved. And on Black Pearl, we ordered these really nice gill fleece jackets for everyone because it was coming into winter. And I remember them all arriving, and Oleg and I sitting in the container office on the dock, and he said, "What are these?" And I said, "Well, it's the jackets." And he looked out the window and he pointed and he said, "Well, that guy there, he gets the first jacket, and don't give anyone else a jacket for 24 hours. And I looked out and I thought, that's cool. And so he said, without him, no one would come to work. They don't understand that. But if he didn't do his job, and they never thank him, because I've watched him every time I've been here, they wouldn't come to work. And he was the guy who cleaned the toilets and the pantry every day. And he was like, give it to him and tell them why he's getting it.
That's lovely.
And from then on, he got thanked.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, oh yeah, it starts here. This guy is just as important as this guy.
He noticed that, and he appreciated everyone playing a part in his passion project.
Yeah. And he said, his thing was he'd started his own business, and he knew that without the whole package, it doesn't work. And the package is everyone.
Yeah. And often the people who claim the least amount of thanks are the people who, like you say, hold things together.
Yeah.
Oh, he sounded a great guy, and what a project to work on. So she's now in Montenegro, having a little bit of work done to get ready. And then what is the plan for her for the rest of the season and the coming year?
So we're finishing dry dock in the next week, and then she'll go sailing, and we're up for charter. We're fully chartered for August. We've got 2 weeks available still at the end of July, and we've got some time available in September. And then we'll hopefully be going across to the Caribbean again for the winter. We have a couple of inquiries already for chartering in the Caribbean. So yeah, fully chartering. The crew are happy. The boat, it'll benefit the boat. And
she's ready to go.
She's definitely ready to go.
And ready to be
seen.
Used and appreciated for what she was built for.
Yeah, I mean, December the 4th in Antigua at the Antigua Boat Show, having worked on her for 12 and a half years, was the first time I had seen her fully dressed.
Really?
Yeah. And
how did that feel?
That was quite, kind of special. I thought what I liked the most was the fact that the crew had listened to what he wanted and what his vision was, and they'd dressed the boat, in a way that was sympathetic, and it was good.
That's really nice.
Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, I heard very good things because some of our team came over and
they did.
And kindly got given a tour, which I was a bit jealous of, and they said she was really one of a kind. So
she's definitely that. I mean, the interior does not reflect the exterior, but it's still, the quality is amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was so interesting.
Pleasure.
Thank you for joining me.
We even missed some bits.
Yeah. Do you want to go back and answer some more?